Sword now, back with you. On this video I will be talking about Yellowjackets Season 2 Episode 1. The episode is called Friends, Romans, Countrymen. So the long-awaited return of Yellowjackets. I just covered all of Season 1 on the channel. You can find those reviews up now if you want to catch up. Full spoilers as always from the start of this review. I'm just fresh off watching it. Sum it up, I'd say it's a solid comeback episode. It does feel pretty typical of a lot of TV shows when they return and they just want to dip in with the characters, show you roughly what's happening. So there's some plots that have more development than others. Most of it is just set up. And I do have a couple of complaints, and they're the sort of complaints I had in Season 1, so I wonder if they might just be things that are going to nag at me and could just be a part of like this show in general. We'll have to see, but I've got to be honest and say there were a couple of rough moments in this comeback episode. There's also quite a bit I like, so a mixed bag a little bit, but I'm maybe just going to give it the benefit of the doubt because it is the first episode. All the stuff in the wilderness I really like. That seems to be like building nicely on what we got last season. And it does keep up with this survival horror theme, which is something I really like. And they're definitely expanding on some of the rules and some of the little like character beat are new characters in this season or new cast members. I'm excited to see Lauren Ambrose as grown-up Van. Also, Elijah Wood has been added, and his role seems like it could be a lot of fun. Lottie Matthews, because she was in the cliffhanger at the end of Season 1. And I'll start with her because there's a lot of intrigue with her, and I'm excited to see more of like that character, that actress, because the younger version, I think the actress has a real sort of edge to her, a real sort of presence, and now we've got like an adult version for the first time. So we do open with her. Travis and Natalie have been looking for Javi for the past 2 months, and because you've had this extreme weather and the snow, it's discussed in this episode at one point between Ben and Natalie, then realistically Javi can't have survived, he must be dead. But she says, I can't really tell that to Travis, I've got to keep up his hope. And that's something which feels like very realistic. And Lottie has been doing something like mystical to them to like protect them, make sure they survive the conditions and that, or that's the way it's played, because like as they're leaving and she does this thing with like when she gets some sort of potion or medicine and she like injects it into their arm. She has this line back about like, oh, do you really think this like wicker shit is necessary? And that's when Lottie says, well, it's working, you come back every time, don't you? And Travis is grateful. So we find out later on in the episode that Lottie has been like keeping Travis's spirits up, than she has been filling his head with these positive vibes about Javi's still out there, you're gonna find him. And that's interesting stuff because like to the rest of the group, no, sadly there's no more hope. So you have this confrontation later on where Natalie tells Lottie, stop filling his head with this stuff, it's false hope. And we just find out what a spiritual person Lottie is, because she has this line about it's never too late. I think certain the lines of the episode is Natalie replying with, you speak way too fucking much, Lottie, which is really funny. So draw the sign, the symbol, like a marking at the snowy window. And then we cut to adult Lottie in the present, and she's running this like seminar type thing outside like these groups of people, and she starts talking about how, yeah, no one can help you. You tried to blame other people, but there's no one but yourself. Not real type thing. So only you can. It's only you really. And so it's all very like spiritual. It's all very like cult like. It's that thing which makes a lot of sense with a character like Lottie, than in the present she's now running like a spiritual cult style group. We also see the survivors returning home from the wilderness in 1998. I'm guessing that's how we might end the season, and they might build to that stuff over the course of the season. Stuff with Shona and with Jackie, because Shona is out to get the meat for the rest of them. She starts talking to Jackie like the image of Jackie, regular thing, because like Ma has like this sarcastic comment about, come on, it's been 2 months. Does she have to do this every time? She has like a funny like reference to Norman Bates actually, which is good. And the rest of them are like, come on, give her a break and give her some time. She needs to deal with this stuff. And Lottie is like the first to step in, like that tells her, yeah, give her a bit more of a chance. So that stuff is interesting, because once again, if you think of Lottie as like a bit of a ringleader, then maybe she has some ulterior motives. But it's also interesting because she seems to have like assumed more power and control over the group, maybe because Jackie has left. So when we cut back to her, which I did guess actually, because we pick up with Natalie after she's been kidnapped by this group, and she sort of outwits like one of them into like untying one of her arms so she can eat, and that allows her to like escape. She brutally stabs her. She has a good line actually about how I might make a decent kidnapper out of you after all. And it's revealed that she's on this ranch style farm, and once she gets outside it's pretty clear it's the place from the start where Lottie was speaking. So she wanders into the woods trying to escape, and she comes across this weird looking cult. They've got like animal masks on or hoods, different things they're chanting, and so she lays her eyes on Lottie and goes straight for her. She's ready to like whack her with a stick. Like one of the others gets in the way, and she says to Lottie, it's like, well, give me one reason why I shouldn't just like cut into you right now. And Lottie's like, because I have a message for you from Travis. So that's kind of the hook of that part. But the Lottie stuff in this episode I'm all enjoying quite a bit. It's definitely one of the most intriguing elements going into this season. Makes sense than it's her group who have kidnapped Natalie. We also learn that Lottie had shock treatment post-wilderness, so that's something to watch out for. Over to Shona and just talk a bit about her and Misty together, because they have a really good scene early on where Misty is like pretending to interrogate her, like she's pretending to be the police and interview Shona. And it's a good fake out, because like they're in like a darkened room, like a police station, and it's not Misty's voice at first. It is the voice of like what we think is a cop interviewing her. So it's a fun fake out, because it's then revealed that Misty is using a voice changer, a voice box, and it crossed my mind that this could be a reference to Scream, even though like in the present they're not in the 90s, but this show has reference the 90s a lot, so I didn't know if that could be like a Scream style reference. And it does get interviewed about Adam's death. It's really fun stuff. This is probably the best scene with Shona in the episode. This has been going on for a while, and it's Misty who's naturally most obsessed with this stuff, because she just wants to cover every base and make sure there's no chance they'll get found out. An hour late, which is pretty good considering they're not coming. And then Misty has the line about, but I made punch. And then she starts to try and get Shona to stay. She starts trying to offer her like her punch kit, Hawaii 5-0. I think that's the cover to the punch maker. Like the only thing you should ever say to a cop is, I want a lawyer. So that's standard. So that's a good scene, because we don't get that many scenes with Shona and Misty, so it seems like they really excel and play off each other very nicely. Again, I feel a bit deja vu in this because it feels like we've been here and done that. So her and Jeff about like covering their tracks and making sure there's no link back to them and what happened with Adam, because Shona finds out that he had an art studio, so they agreed to go there during the day to clean up any evidence, and she sees that he's got all these paintings of her. So they decide, yeah, we need to get rid of these. But at the same time, you get this really weird sort of scene where her on or being in the studio gets them excited. So you get this really extreme Showtime style sex scene as they're looking at these weird sort of paintings. And then later on, they decide to cover it up. And you get this really weird use of that Papa Roach song, Last Resort, and it's when Jeff is in the car later and he's obviously got this release because him and Shona hooked up, and you just see him like thrashing away, and that's the music, which is maybe an odd choice because it's 2021 2022 if you like. Listening to Papa Roach, it just feels about 10 years out of date, but whatever, I can buy it. Maybe it's something he listened to when he was younger. Anyway, that seemed a little bit cheesy to me. Some of the established characters, Misty especially, going into this season, they can be relied on, that you're just going to have a great time and they'll like stay consistent because they've got those characters down good now. And Christina Ricci just never disappoints in this role. She's coming out with so much funny stuff in this episode, because I really enjoyed the scene where she tries to blackmail the guy on reception at the motel where Natalie was staying. And then she goes through all this trouble where she knows where the guy lives and just has info on him that she could use against him. And then in the end it's as simple as, hey, she just left during the middle of the night. And then in the next scene we see Misty looking at the hotel room looking for evidence, and she works out that the lot was pigs. This stuff is already plotting her next big campaign to make her re-elected, and Thais is like, whoa, wait a minute, I've only just been elected. But that's sort of probably quite true to people in those like walks of life. Aisha's at the vet at one point because she gets Sammy a new dog to replace Biscuit, trying to make nice, and the vet recognises her, knows she's been elected to the Senate, and just seems very like fangirl. So I'm not quite sure if that's going to be a thing, if this character will pop up again, maybe become a bit too obsessed, or if it's just showing that she now has a bit of a celebrity around the town. Simone finding that messed up shit in the basement, which is her at school, and just tells her to stay the fuck away. And then when she talks to Taisha, she says, I know, I saw what you've got in the basement. And Taisha doesn't remember anything because it was a trance. So Simone, who I think is a bit over the top in the scene, because she sort of threatens, if you don't step down from your Senate role, I'm going to let people know I'm going to the press. They'll find out what's happening. So it was just a bit over the top, because like really you would just think her priority is, hey, I don't want this crazy woman near our son and you've got to get help, rather than it shouldn't really matter to her whether she stays like in the political role or not. But she was a little over the top in that scene, even though you can understand it. And later on Taissa goes back and she finds what Simone was talking about. She's freaked out, and then it's at that moment the new dog comes in, and you almost get a Blacksley funny moment, because she picks up the dog and says, I'm going to treat you better. A complaint, like back in the wilderness, is we're introduced to these new characters, Crystal in particular, but there's a couple of them sitting in the cabin like making comments. Now, we've never seen these characters before, never been mentioned before. Now, I know it's been hinted that there's other characters out there with them and that they were in a group, but it was a reasonably small group on that plane. A lost situation where there's like 48 survivors from that crash, so realistically there's plenty of other people you can introduce. This was a small close-knit group, and Crystal has never been mentioned before. I just thought that was a bit jarring, the way like we're introducing these characters like they've always been there. I don't know, maybe it's going to turn out then there's a reason for it, who knows, but that's something that stood out for me. And we get a little bit on Crystal. We find out she's got a singing background, because there's a scene with her and Misty where Crystal is like singing to herself, and she tells her, it just helps my nerves, it helps me to go toilet out here, and she tries to encourage Misty to sing, and that could be a callback to season 1. Get what I think about Crystal? That scene, it felt like it was a bit forced. Like, it just felt like it was a character, this kooky sort of character, rather than like a real person. But there's definitely potential with her and Misty and the whole singing lessons thing. Overall, it's a solid episode. It's a solid comeback for the show. And the wilderness stuff I am enjoying still. I enjoy how they're adding to it and adding to some of the rules, because another thing I noticed is then they've got this thing where Misty doesn't go anywhere near the cook-in, which is probably sensible. I don't even mind Shona talking to dead Jackie. That worked pretty well, that scene. And it makes a lot of sense. It like goes with the show. The other big scene I almost missed was Travis has a freak out at one point, and it's actually Lottie who calms him down, and she does some sort of spiritual mojo on him, and that's when Natalie pulls her aside. So it's like, what the fuck was that? And it's then that you get the line about, yeah, I wish you would stop talking so much. Stuff I'm definitely into seeing more about. So yeah, that's Yellowjackets Season 2 Episode 1. Let me know what you thought of this first episode. These are coming out weekly, so I'll keep up with it and do a review a week. Let me know your thoughts, like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. What stood out to you about the episode? What was good, what was bad? Are you excited for season 2? So you can also support me on Patreon, patreon.com/borednow, for some extra perks, including commentaries. Thanks for listening, keep watching TV, and I'll be back soon. You bet your life it is. You bet.